There's actually 3 levels of charging. Level 1 is the 110, 120 volt outlet, like is in this wall, like is all over the place. Once you start looking for them, those outlets are everywhere. And every one of these new cars will come with an extension cord that will allow you to plug into any outlet like that anywhere. That would take a long time to charge. 12 hours, 14 hours. That's really just for what we call opportunity charging. You're visiting a friend and hey, you might as well plug in while you're hanging out, right? Then there's level 2 charging, which is 240 volt charging, which is like an electric dryer plug. We have one in our garage. And that's level 2 charging. So for instance, my RAV4 and the Nissan Leaf and others charge if you were completely empty, it would take 5 or 6 hours maybe. Now, you don't usually drive a gas car till it's completely empty, right? You usually pull into a gas station before you're completely empty. So you're not going to spend that much time charging. But with electric cars, the thing is, you don't even think about it. You come home at the end of your day, you plug in, and you forget about it. And when you get up in the morning, it's full. But if you need to drive, like I drove my mother down to Santa Cruz this past weekend to visit a friend because she was out here visiting from Missouri. And with 100 miles from San Francisco, I can go to Santa Cruz, I can go to Santa Rosa, I can go to Sacramento on one charge, and then I need to plug in. And so I plugged in for, I think maybe 3.5, 4 hours, and had lunch and walked around Santa Cruz and then came back. Now fast charging, which I don't even remember the volts and the amps, but that's under 20 minutes you get 80% of your charge. When electric car batteries are charging, the first 80% is relatively fast, the last 20% is slower because they're doing what's called leveling. The batteries are doing this little dance, and that's a slower process. So charging the first 80% is relatively simple. It's all about the plug. Where are you going to charge? Well, 98% of the time, people will charge at home, in their garage or their carport. People who live in apartments and condos will not be the first adopters of this. But the industry is already looking forward to where will people charge who don't have their own garage? Where will people charge when they need to drive further than their car will go in one charge? And there is a charging industry ramping up. There are going to be thousands of chargers built into the Bay Area in the next 1 to 2 years. There's going to be tens of thousands put in California and many around the country. 98% of people will go home at the end of their day, plug in their car, it's on a timer, and forget about it while they go to sleep. And it'll charge between midnight and 7 a.m. when the utility rates are lowest. And that's how most people will charge. When you're driving long distance, which would be best done in a plug-in hybrid for now, because you don't have to worry about stopping to charge for long. And to our surprise, the fast charging is moving forward faster than we thought. This is the first one in California. It's near Davis, and the Nissan Leaf will come with 2 ports, well, one for a medium level charge system and the other one for fast charge. So you could pull over and in less than 20 minutes charge up to 80% of your capacity and be on your way.
Several people in this community are talking about buying electric vehicles, and in fact, I think most people are interested in the Leaf, but if it's a 220 volt thing that takes 5 hours to charge, it's hard to share one thing. So that brings us to the level 3. Is it like beyond the reach of a condo complex to install one of those?
This is a question that many people are dealing with right now, and you all are on the cusp. This is really just shaking out as we talk. So I don't have all the answers for you, but Plug-in America is right now building a page that's equivalent to our plug-in vehicle tracker page, where we're calling it plug-in app page, which will list all of the charger box companies. I think that the commercial fast chargers, I think the best price you could get is $50,000 or $60,000. There's also a downside of you don't really want to fast charge batteries too often. It does more wear and tear on the batteries than slow charging. So there's some real downsides to that. The one other thing that I should mention though is you and I and everyone else really wants to try and make a decision within the next couple of months, because there is another set of tax credits that will give you 50% tax incentive on any charging station that you install before the end of this year. I don't know that I would recommend that. I think as much as you don't want to, I've been thinking about your situation, and if I lived here, what would be ideal? I think having individual or at least multiple chargers is going to have to be the way to go. You all have to know what your driving patterns are. You know, if someone worked nights and someone worked days and you wanted to share one, sure. You people all communicate with each other better than most neighbors, I think, and so it's probably more doable here, but it would be tricky.
Do any of the boxes have the capacity to charge more than one vehicle at a time?
No.
So it would really be...
It's one at a time, and you have to go physically take it off. You can't just like set it with two things connected and say, when this one's done, do that one. That won't work. Depending on your driving patterns, another scenario that might work, if you're all sort of parked next to each other, maybe every other car you want to have one 240-volt charger and have a 110 plug at each of those cars. Because if one of you is only driving 20 miles a day, heck, you could plug into 110 overnight and not even have to deal with the 220.
Right.
But it's there for occasionally if you need to. Like let's say one day you drive much further than you usually do.
There'll be an iPhone app to tell me where's the nearest charging station.
There already is. I can show it to you.
Okay.
There was, when in the last generation, we created a website called evchargernews.com, which right now shows you where all the charging stations are, including for Tesla, including for all the old generation chargers. And they 6 months ago made an iPhone app. It's great. I've used it a bunch of times.
So if I get down to 10% charge, I can say, oh, I need to get to a station now. And it will tell me there's one 2 miles away.
Well, that kind of stuff is going to be built into the cars.
Okay.
The Nissan Leaf, all of that will be on the display. I won't even have to pull out my iPhone. It will tell you how much estimated range you have left based on how you're driving right now.
Mm-hmm.
So either you need to start driving more efficiently and slow down, or and they'll show you where all the charging stations are within that range. It's all going to be fed to you right on the screen. There's two things moving faster than we thought it would. One is the fast charging, and the other is what's called vehicle to grid, V2G. And this is still a little futuristic, mostly because the car companies are shy about going there and don't have any national incentive to go there. And the utilities are still figuring it out. And it's the idea that when you plug in your car, not only will you be able to send electricity to your car, but that stored electricity in your car could potentially be fed back to the grid. There's many ways this is beneficial. I'll give you just two quick ones. If we're going to use more wind power in America, there's different flavors of electricity in the grid. And to keep the grid stable, they need what's called regulation energy and another one. And that's just little bursts of energy to keep the grid stable. That could come from cars that are plugged in. If our cars are able to handle that little bit of give and take, we would be able to build thousands more windmills and incorporate them into our grid. Now, one example of an outfit that has done a study on this is BART. BART, when it contracts with PG&E, contracts for a certain amount of electricity per day. If they go below that limit, well, they've wasted their money. They paid for electricity they didn't use. But if they use more electricity that day than their contract specifies, they get socked a lot of money by PG&E, just like we would if we go over our tier. So they want to stay below that limit whenever they can. So they did a study. Well, you know, all these commuters who drive to the parking lots and park their car and take BART into the city, and the car is parked there like 9 hours a day. What if that was a plug-in car? And in exchange for being able to charge for free in the BART parking lot, you sign an agreement saying if BART needs to, it would pull a little bit of electricity out of your car in order to use that electricity and stay below its contracted limit, so it doesn't go over its limit with PG&E. The upshot, BART would save $250,000 a year, and the average driver would save more than $1,000 a year by charging for free in their lot and not buying gasoline. So it's a win-win. That's called V2G. You're not going to see it in the first round, so I don't usually talk about it much, but it's something that we could do with these vehicles. When they were rolling out the Leaf reservations, it came from a good place. They wanted to make the whole process as simple for the average consumer as possible. You know, if you're confused about thinking, if I have to go out and pick a charger, how do I know? Who do I, you know, which company do I go to? Which one's okay? How much do they cost? They wanted to simplify it. They wanted to, in one process, have you be able to put down a deposit, sign up to have an electrician come out to your home and make sure you have the right wiring, or give you an estimate on what it would take to put a charger box there. And they contracted with AeroVironment, which has been in this niche for decades. They're a very highly respected company, to be available to do that. But they gave the impression that they're the only company that you can work with. And we had a lot of problems. Those of us who were the first to sign up for the Leaf had some problems with them coming and doing the estimate. And actually just this week, their charger box got UL listed, Underwriters Laboratory. There's kind of 3 levels here. It needs to be designed to the standard that the Society of Automotive Engineers specified. So all of these chargers will come now with what's called a J1772 connector. Whereas in the last generation of electric vehicles, there was the small paddle, and there was the large paddle, and there was the Avcon box, and none of them could use each other's chargers. This time, every charger station out there is going to have the same connector. So that's one of the ways we've made progress. But we all feel like AeroVironment was sloppy about some things and was charging way too much in certain instances when it should be much simpler. And now on Nissan's website, when you make a deposit, there is a section that says, you know, you can sign up with AeroVironment to get an estimate. You do not have to use them. They're not the only one. But they don't feed you any information on anyone else. That's why we're stepping in to give you that information. There's only 2 that are under, so everyone meets the Society of Automotive Engineers standard. And then there's Underwriters Laboratory, UL, which kind of certifies any gizmo in our society. And right now there's only 2 that are UL listed, but the others are in the process. So AeroVironment and I think Coulomb, it's either Coulomb or Clipper Creek, is UL listed. And then there's the ones that are Nissan approved, who have jumped through Nissan's hoops, because they want to make sure that they're dealing with reputable companies. And I think AeroVironment and Clipper Creek are approved, but the other ones are in the process of jumping through the hoops. So 2 months from now, anything I tell you is going to be different, because it's changing day by day. The other thing to know about some of these charging companies, which is true of Coulomb, may be true of ParkPod and some of the others, certainly is true of Better Place if they ever start rolling out chargers. They may not just sell you the charger. They may require that you sign up for their subscription service, in which they would bill you kind of like your cell phone. And instead of charging you minutes for the cell phone, they would charge you minutes of charging or miles driven or whatever. The beef that we have with Coulomb right now, and this could change easily, is they're looking at maybe charging, they won't say what their rates would be, but they will only commit to saying it won't be more than what you're paying now for gasoline. Well, one of the advantages of driving electric is you want it to cost less, right? So why charge up for this subscription service if you can just get the charger and just, you know. So I can't personally run down every single one of these and tell you what to do, except to say it's a little too early to decide.
Except that you need to decide something and do it before December 30th if you want this
Exactly.
tax credit. And in fact, you need to do it before before a certain number of other people do it, because then there won't be any tax credit left.
Which is why, in addition to doing whatever you're doing, it would pay to support Plug in America, because we have a part-time lobbyist in Washington and a part-time lobbyist in Sacramento, and we are working very hard to get all of this extended, because we're on the very first wave. And it's all happening too quick. People aren't going to have their cars even by the time the year ends. So we particularly want to extend that tax credit for the charging installation. It's now the middle of September. I would think that our page will be up within a month, and that if you decide by mid-November, that should be plenty of time for you to get one of these things installed before the end of the year.